Hello and welcome to the Kachara registration form tutorial. As you can see on the screen, this is the whole Kachara registration form over here. It has 5 sections. Section A, Section B, Section C, Section D, and Section E. And finally, there is 3 sections down here which you need to fill if you are the interviewer. If you are the interviewer, you need to fill in your name here, your location of the interview here, and finally the date. So let's move on to the tutorial. Alright, let's get started. As you can see, this is section A of the Kachara registration form, which is the personal details section. In this section, you're required to fill in all the essential information regarding the client's identity, such as their name, gender, age, date of birth, race, religion, address, contact number, and everything else in this section. You'll first need to fill in the full name of the client according to their IC here. Then, fill in the client's IC number over here. If the client mentioned that they lost their IC, you can request for a legitimate document that can prove their identity, such as their birth certificate or a police report. In the event that your client's a foreigner, you can write down their passport or UNHCR number over here. I would like to emphasize on gender. I understand that it's very easy to identify the client's gender by looking at them. However, in the case where the client's appearance makes it hard to determine their gender, you can refer to their IC card number, the last digit. If the last digit is an odd number such as 13579, the cardholder is a male. If the last digit is an even number, which is 24680, the cardholder is a female. It is important to cross-reference these two parts, not only to determine the gender of the client, but to also identify whether the client is up to something fishy. The date of birth can be also found in the first 6 digits of the IC number, which is the year of birth, month of birth, and the day of birth. If the client possesses an IC, the client's nationality will always be a Malaysian. After getting the address from the client, please circle the ownership of the address right here, whether it belongs to the client's family, or the client's own rented house, or is the friends of the client's house, or the last known address by the client. In the emergency contact and name part, please remember to state the emergency contact's relationship with the client as well as the name. Finally, from question 14 until 19, these few questions are very important because it allows us to have a mental image of the client's appearance. However, in case that the client does not know these few questions, please leave a dash right there. Moving on to section B, which is the social history section. In this section, you are required to fill in the social history background of the client. First, you will need to identify the level of education of the client over here. If the client is an SPM graduate, you need to identify whether he's a grade 1 graduate or a grade 2 graduate. If the client does not know, you may just circle SPM. Next, identify the client's marital status and fill it up here. Find out whether the client is single, married, divorced, or widowed. Moving on, we must identify the client's current job, whether he's having a job now or he is jobless, and fill it up over here. If the client is jobless, you must write down the duration of the client being jobless over here. And finally, you must write down the client's family background over here. Please find out how many siblings, how many children does the client have, and whether their parents are still around, and most importantly, the relationship between the client and his or her family. Moving on to section C, which is the living status of the client. You'll first have to identify whether the client is a homeless or an urban poor. Please find more information about this by interviewing the clients regarding their income, rent, and the place where they stay. If the client is a homeless, please record down the duration of the client sleeping on the streets over here. The next question is an important question, which is the places where the client usually go during the day and during the night. This is important because we need to know the whereabouts of the clients so that we can find them. If the client has any long-standing illness, please record it down here. Moving on, please find out whether the client is on drugs or not. When facing a Malay client, please substitute the word drugs or dada with the word barang. For example, abang pernah main barang tak? If the client's response is yes or stop, please indicate the drug that the client used in this list here. If the client mentions a drug name that is not in the list, you can write it down on this form. Another thing to keep in mind is to find out whether the client is on methadone or not. Methadone is a drug used in the clinic to help the client reduce their addiction to drugs. If the client is taking methadone, then the client is on drugs. You also need to find out how long has the client been taking the drugs and write it down here. And you also need to find out how many times the client has been into rehabilitation, whether it's voluntary or being caught by the police, and write it down here. Next, you also need to find out whether the client is a HIV patient. Please circle the appropriate statement provided to you in this list here. If the client is a HIV positive, please ask for the client's CD4 reading and write it down here. You'll also need to write down the last checkup that was done on the client over here. Now for the next part of section C, which is question 12, one of the most important questions. Because this question asks the reason of why the client is becoming a homeless or the reason the client is seeking help from KSK. In this question, there are 5 categories: financial causes, stranded cases, health or disability, addiction problem, and conflicts. As you interview, please circle the relevant statement provided in these 5 categories. Addiction problem is one of the most important categories because this allows us to understand the status of the client. When the client elaborates their mentioned problem, please write it down in the space provided here. For question 14, 15, and 16, these 3 questions are interrelated and are only for clients who are ex-convicts. If the client is an ex-convict, please identify the conviction that the client has done and circle the appropriate conviction in this list provided here. If the client has done a conviction that is not in the list, you can write it down over here. You'll also need to record down how many times has the client been jailed before over here. And you need to ask the client whether that the client still needs to occasionally report to the police station to do police surveillance, and write whether it's a yes or no here. Let me further emphasize on question 12. As you already know, this question is quite important because this question tells why the client has become homeless. It's so important to find the cause that caused the client to become homeless, especially the root cause. Let me share an example with you. As I share this example, please follow the arrow. Now, a client slowly walks towards you and starts to share the story. When I was still young, I wanted to make my parents proud by working in a high-ranking job, just like all my friends and my neighbors. I met a man one day that promised me that job in Kuala Lumpur if only I paid him a small amount of money. On the day when I went to Kuala Lumpur, I couldn't find a man, nor could I find a place where he promised me that I can get a job. I realized I got cheated. I didn't want to bring embarrassment back to my family, so I continued my stay in Kuala Lumpur to find a job. As days passed, I still couldn't get a job, and my frustrations kept building up. I couldn't handle it, so I decided to seek comfort in alcohol. One night, I had a little bit too much of alcohol and got drunk. I started a fight and the police caught me and jailed me. Once I was released, I realized I was an ex-convict. I decided to go back and start over. Although my parents accepted me, I still couldn't accept myself for being easily cheated, for not being able to get a job, and for being jailed. It was so embarrassing, I decided to run away. I decided to go back to Kuala Lumpur to find a job, so I can return to my family and make them proud again. As time passes, I still couldn't find a job and had no choice but to sleep on the street. One night, when I was sleeping, I got robbed. I didn't know what to do. I was so stressed and frustrated I couldn't think straight. I felt like giving up. Now I'm just a 65 years old single man without a job. I hope you understand and are more clear on what and when to circle after hearing the examples. Most of these things here are quite easy and straightforward to understand. Now allow me to explain to you those which are a bit difficult to understand. First, lack child support means the client has a child which does not support them, while poverty means that the client is living under an extreme condition of poorness. Overstayed are for foreigners who are living in Kuala Lumpur with an expired permit. Moving on. Mentally ill means that the client has a mental issue which impairs their thoughts, emotion, behavior, and other functioning. Finally, psychology ill, for example, is a client who is overstressed or over-worries. Next is section D, which is the assistance needed by the client. You'll first need to identify the aid needed by the client and circle the appropriate services that the client needs in this list here. If the client requests for an IC replacement, please write down the amount of time that the client have lost their IC over here. You'll also need to write down the previous jobs of the client and the years or months of experience that the client had with that job over here and here. This is done so that we can know what kind of job that the client wants or whether the client has any working problems. Any other requests made by the clients can be written down here. Finally, section E, the client's impression section. The interviewer are required to evaluate their clients based on their observation here. Please circle the correct statement regarding the client based on your observation. Any additional info, remarks, or other observation about the clients can be written here. It is advisable to fill in this section after the client have left to prevent any conflict with the client. Lastly, the interviewer are required to write their name here and the location of the interview over here, and finally the date here. That is all for our tutorial for Kechara registration form. Thank you.